Good afternoon. Welcome to the Museum of the Future, which is our stunning location for our guest and our special event today. Today we have CFTE that's hosting a Future Skills Initiative workshop session and roundtables. And what we've got is, as part of that initiative, we've taken the opportunity to get this beautiful location to interview a guest that's not a stranger to the place and the space. So Nader, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Pleasure to be here.
Actually, Nader, can you tell us a little bit about the space we're in? Like, what is this building we're in?
Well, the first thing I can tell you is that the calligraphy on there
Yes.
is extremely meaningful.
There's
a whole panel on the ground floor which explains each one of these. But the first quote is the one that's the eye-capturing one.
What is that?
The future
Yes.
belongs to those that imagine it, design it, and execute it. It's a quote from the Science Check methodology. And it's something that we live by on an ongoing basis. That's myself, Dubai. I think it's something that we can all live by. It's one of those things that keeps you thinking about the what next. I think it's a brilliant statement.
Imagine it, design it, and execute.
Right.
Execute.
It's about getting it done, not just thinking about the fluff.
Getting it done. Because most of the time, we often have this romantic idea that the idea is it, right? We think it's 80, 90% the idea, but it's 10% the idea or whatever.
Right.
And then the design is more, and then the execution is, I don't know, 70% or whatever.
Or sometimes zero.
Well, we don't want to talk about that too much, guys. We're here to be very, very positive because, in fact, Nader, what you do today is something that is very close to this facility in the vision His Highness had, along with the institution of the DIFC, right? Could you tell us more about who you are and what you do today?
Of course, how far back do you want me to go?
Just for right now, and then we're going to peel back, and Ronit is going to ask you.
You can go
more.
as far back as you want to.
Yeah, but right now, just
whatever
love
feels
to,
natural to you.
love to learn just about what you're doing right now.
So my current position is the managing director of the Dubai Future District Fund. My primary role is about looking at our portfolio of companies as a fund, what we've invested into and how do we support them on multiple ways. So how do we help them on a strategic perspective, operational perspective? How do we help them with fundraising? How do we help them business development-wise with the other side of key part of my mandate, the ecosystem. So how do we work with the ecosystem to understand their needs, their problem statements, and matchmaking? I love that word matchmaking because at the end of the day, we don't want to be perceived as another business development house for that specific entity, but being done by design, by purpose, for the needs of the other side. So if I was to give an example, an RTA is a massive conglomerate with multiple businesses, multiple stakeholders. They all have different problem statements, but understanding that those specific needs of the specific businesses and connecting them to the right portfolio, whether it's ours or the portfolio of the funds that we've also invested in. So the Dubai Future District Fund is not just a direct investment vehicle into tech, but it's also a fund-of-funds platform as well. We've invested in incumbents, some emerging fund managers, amongst other investments that we've done. And a lot of what I'm there to do is connect the two sides to one another. The wider Dubai ecosystem and beyond, so soft landing in different jurisdictions, etc., with the portfolio and helping them grow. That's the sort of the 30,000 foot view of what I'm there to do. And a big part of my journey to get to this point has sort of touched on different elements of what I am doing there. Sorry, am I getting a bit monotonous?
No, that's excellent. That's actually the next question I was going to ask is you know, exactly Ronit was saying, go as far back as you can. So please do continue because we'd love to understand your experience building up to what you're doing today. So please do. Tell us more about your previous settings and your experiences which have brought you forward to be able to do what you're doing right now at DFDF. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you're touching on a passion point of mine. So I started off with a corporate track, I like to call it, and a startup track. I've been involved as a co-founder, as an advisor, as a sole founder to a number of different entities, whether in tech and not, from distribution to trade to health tech to travel tech. And a lot of that was understanding the nuances of sort of grassroots problem statements, bottlenecks to development, whether they be regulatory bottlenecks, corporate engagement and tech adoption bottlenecks. So what is it that it would take to understand sort of the pulse on the ground that needs to be fixed or addressed sitting on the other side of the table as I'm at right now?
You're talking about MVP and market product fit and minimum viable product. You're hearing, these are problem statements for companies to join hands, all the time. Yeah.
They have all our problems to solve, right? But at the same time, do they have the right appetite? Are their procurement teams given enough autonomy to decide that that's the best product for them? Or do they have to go with a blue chip just because their job's on the line? Have they picked something that's slightly off rather than 50% off, but it was a brand name that went wrong? And which one would be would put more pressure on them and their roles, right?
Right.
And it's changing that mindset of being open to trying testing something that directly hits what your team is trying to address, as opposed to, this is the market norm. This is what I have to tick a tick box in sort of the series of questionnaires that they have as a procurement sort of manager at a big corporate, for example.
It's super interesting that you touch upon that, because one of the things we talk about a lot is when we look at technology, and Ronit and I do some investing, is this thing my father said, unfortunately, because he's always right and I have a problem with him being right all the time, is it is. It's very frustrating.
Technology. The older brother is always right. I'm the older brother, so it's okay.
Oh no, I'm the youngest. I'm always right, so it's okay.
Your father's right, your brother is right.
No, my brother, I love him. He's listening to this
and
podcast.
The wife is always right.
You're right.
Yes, Pandora's box, gentlemen. Pandora's box. Let's keep the lid closed there. Let's keep the lid. But what he said, technology for the sake of technology does nothing for nobody.
Yeah.
And that is exactly what you're talking about, because we come up with these ideas which we think are great, and we get stubborn almost like by default. We're also unaware. Yeah. Because you're so stubborn to prove that you were right or that something can work, you're not open to actually perhaps understanding what needs to be required on the ground for someone to pay for it or to change their mindset to adopt it. So even my team, when I talk to them, right, we've built an amazing product, we built an amazing service. I'm like, okay, go and sell it in the market. And
get when you come back,
get someone to pay for it, right? And they come back to the market and they go, that's wonderful. What we think you have built is fantastic. Great, buy it. And then they sit there and go, it's not in our roadmap. And you're like, oh, I forgot to ask my customers, what do they actually want, right? Yeah. So you think what's great. So this is a hugely important piece, because if you expand on this more from a government perspective, I know you said 30,000, but even if you go to 50,000, Dubai does so much from an infrastructure perspective. RTA, transportation, DEWA, energy. These are massive, massive infrastructures.
Buildings, and they will come.
Right. Yeah. But none of them, as much as they are excellent organizations, startup nurturers of startups, right? They do everything on 100 million, a 200 million, a $500 million scale, 2-year time frame projects. They're not looking at the startup that's looking at doing a minimum viable product or changing something in 3 months, 6 months, 2 months. These very fast, nimble things. So what you're doing there, I think would be super interesting is if you could tell us some use cases or some things which you've managed to translate from either your personal direct investments at DFDF or from the funds that you've invested in.
Yeah, and maybe if I take a step back and I'll give you some examples. You mentioned tech for the sake of tech. And it's a great concept because one side of it is the startup lens, right? So the startup lens is, I built this solution is the solution for the world. I know it, I have this gut feeling, I have this problem, therefore others will have it too. And you go on this journey of building it to the point where you're like, it's perfect for me. But what I want to also bring into the picture is, and you mentioned it, is what you're doing here with Fumo, what we're doing in terms of engagement with the government, is constantly putting out there what's available. Because on the other side of the table, they might think of, this is the best solution I can find for what my problem is. But they're not seeing everything, because everything is constantly changing, evolving. There's new under the rock, under the table, someone that's doing something in stealth mode. There's so much going out there, and what you see, what I see, what Ronit sees, what everyone in the audience is seeing. I mean, honestly, we're seeing so much, and it's our duty to engage with as many people as possible, discuss about all the possibilities of solutions. Because on one side, that might trigger an aha moment from the lens of the potential buyer, the potential incorporator on the corporate side, that would potentially, maybe that tech for the sake of tech might be the perfect solution, but they're so ahead of their time that they built something that they weren't aware was even possible.
Yeah.
So when you bring the two together, they're just speaking different languages. So one thing I want to put out there is this constant engagement needs to happen on both sides. A pulse check on the tech for tech and making sure it's not just tech for tech.
Right.
But then on the other side, that they're aware of the possibilities of the what ifs. But then more specifically, I think we've seen a lot of success stories. We've had a number of portfolio companies that have broken that barrier of corporate, the barriers of international.
Yeah.
I mean, we have portfolio companies that are working with the major leagues in the US, for example.
Oh, wow.
On a translation perspective, on a dubbing perspective, Canada.ai is doing some great work. On the other end of the world, we have La Liga working with Views, for example, another portfolio company of ours.
Views has done very well.
Absolutely. I mean, you've seen their iconic logo in Media City, for example, but they're doing wonders. They're crossing borders. And the other thing I guess I wanted to touch on is what is the TAM? What is the SAM of people that are building out in this region? And the TAM has always been, I'm tackling a regional problem, and this is the size of my market.
Right.
GCC or MENA.
Right.
And what we're seeing is, for the first time in the last 10 years, there are people that are going out there, but we're not talking enough about the successes of what they're doing outside of the borders of our periphery.
Yeah.
And that's exciting. And I think sharing a lot of these stories, I know you've seen a lot of them. I'm just talking about the couple from our portfolio.
Sure.
But there's so many success stories out there that come beyond the remits of this region and are solving problems that are global in nature.
And just to clarify for the audience, you're investing in companies building anywhere, or they have to be building in Dubai or the UAE or the GCC, or just tell us a bit more about the mandate.
So at a very high level, we were created by two anchor investors. They're both government entities, the Dubai Future Foundation and the DIFC, the Dubai International Financial Center. And the idea there was to set up a fund that has access to the vast partners, the vast networks as government that they have and corporates that they have. They've been engaging with corporates and government for a very long time. And by having them as anchor partners and investors in this whole story, we for the first time are able to pass that on to the two strategies that we have as a deployment strategies. The direct vehicle is an early stage to early growth vehicle. So we invest in from pre-seed up to Series B in first checks, and we do follow-on investments up to Series C. And on the fund side, we do early stage investors as well as investors that dabble in and around the growth stage. On the fund side, it's only natural that funds in this region have a regional remit. So on that front, we look at things on a local, MENA, and then MIASA perspective. So how are we covering this wider region through our funds to give them a platform and a corridor effect on, let's find them a way to Dubai and setting up in Dubai, and finding portfolios from here, ways of expanding via their networks to the wider region. On the direct portfolio, we're a little bit more focused on purely the Dubai ecosystem through a couple of lenses. One is they're established here and they're solving for a market need specifically here. The second lens is they're established here, they're solving for global needs. And the third lens is there a regional entity, whether it's a portfolio company of our portfolio funds or a regional entity that sees a lot of strategic reasons to be here, whether it's on a business development perspective, on an operational perspective, de-risking perspective to be based out of Dubai, serving the wider region. So there's a strategic reason why they move in, but aren't originally
they're not suitcase tourist.
Not a suitcase.
They want to come and build.
To a dollar, but moving here because
they have a dream,
there's
a vision.
Here, and we're making it easier for them to make that decision.
Absolutely. And that's a really important point, right? Because oftentimes, sadly, And we're seeing this again in this last cycle, given the lack of funding elsewhere in the world. A lot of our friends in all parts of the world seem to come here thinking,
It's
just
automatic.
let's just hoover up some LP checks and then disappear. In banking, we call them suitcase bankers. And someone, we both obviously live here, and you were born and brought up here, so that's something we find very annoying. People think they're just going to come and boom, do
I
it.
must say that narrative is starting to shift.
It has, yeah.
Oh, it has, finally.
No, we're having a lot of
Last year and
people.
a half,
No,
you've seen all
totally.
the international names. I mean, the person that you're going to be
Yeah.
interviewing right after us. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a great example of the caliber of people.
No, I tell you, and staying here.
Yeah,
No, I
staying
remember
here.
when Gara first met me when I moved here, so many of my friends back in the UK were like, "Are you retiring? Why are you moving to?" And now they keep asking me, "How do I move to Dubai or Abu Dhabi? Not why,
We're
how?"
at an event,
Yeah.
a week and a half ago
Yeah.
before
Yeah.
one of the events by one of our portfolio
Sure.
funds, and they've done some research with Google
Yeah.
on a search perspective.
Yeah.
And what they were focused on is on an intent perspective.
Yeah.
Where do you intend to move?
Okay.
And this is the entire world.
And who
Open-ended
did this
question.
study?
This is
Google.
So Google Analytics.
This is Google Search Analytics
Yeah.
alongside one of our portfolio funds.
Right.
They worked on a project together to capture this
Oh
housing
wow!
intent.
Yeah. Did they
And
publish
they
this or?
color-coded it. I'm not sure if they published
Oh,
it, which
okay.
is why I'm not sharing the names. But
Here we go.
What was
Yeah.
interesting about
Good
it
data.
Yeah.
is they
Who came top?
the color coding
Yeah.
was green is Dubai. And something like
Who
two-thirds
else? Who else was in the green category?
So the green was the color coding for Dubai, and
Okay.
then there were other colors.
Okay.
Oh, wow. So
And
we
there
were green.
there was a long tail of
Yeah,
other
yeah.
colors.
Yeah.
And then you had green, and 2/3 of the world was green. Even Greenland was
Oh.
green. I'm like, what is the
this is
link to-
green. Like where from the world
So
people
where-
wanted
if
to
you
come
wanted
to
move
Dubai?
Anywhere.
Yeah, where would you go?
Where would you go? So one part of it was
Yeah.
the question of the direct
yeah.
question.
Yeah.
The other one was the intentionality.
Yeah.
So they
Wow.
pick up intentionality by looking for schools for kids,
Yeah.
work,
Yeah.
other things
Income,
like-
average income.
Sure.
other indications of intent, and it was
Yeah.
beautiful to see it
Yeah.
to the point that you're just raising there
Yeah.
about how much momentum of that narrative
Yeah,
has
yeah,
shifted to.
yeah.
Do I just want to do business there and out?
Yeah,
to,
yeah,
I
yeah.
want to move there.
Yeah,
and Intentionality includes family.
Yeah,
includes,
family. That's the key one is of the family, right? Because
Right, big
in
time.
the old days, what they would come is that the man or sometimes the women would come and just work, and their families
Yes,
would not be
yes,
here.
yes.
Their wives or their husbands. or
Correct,
their
absolutely
kids,
correct.
And that has changed.
And you
in
know,
the
it's
last
it's
cycle.
two things that have happened
Yeah.
in parallel.
Yeah.
Where if you can draw a point from today, this conversation we're
Yeah.
having right now about
Yeah.
what's happening about building global businesses from
Yeah.
here, and people who are globally looking to
Yeah.
relocate here
Yeah.
from a lifestyle, but
Yeah.
work because you can do
Opportunity.
that. No, yes,
Opportunity.
but if you draw it back to a point, there's actually one point you can draw it back to, and that's the launch of DFA. The launch
Okay.
of the Dubai Futures Accelerator
Okay.
is actually the starting point of a formal recognition by a government entity
Right.
in the region,
Yeah.
not even just the UAE,
When
in
was
the
that?
region. 8 years ago, 8 years ago. That's
Okay, about the time I came.
right.
Yeah.
And if I can also just add
Yeah.
one point to that,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
what's beautiful about the story you're saying, and
Yeah.
is that it wasn't just usually when you have an acceleration program,
Yeah.
it's a B2B
Yes.
a sort of
Yeah.
solution to find the right solutions for you. But this, for the first time, engaged government.
Yes.
And that's
Yeah.
how forward-thinking
Yes.
government is here
Exactly.
incorporated.
Yeah,
Exactly.
absolutely.
I was in the ballroom of Emirates Towers, and they said we're converting all this retail space of these amazing restaurants, Scarlett's, Ivy, all of it.
Oh.
We're going to convert all of this
Yeah,
Hakkasan into
Hakkasan. I still remember Hakkasan.
Right. They're going to convert
I
all of this
preferred it when
space.
Hakkasan was in city centre.
We'll scrub that.
Calm is too far away. Yeah, delete this.
They converted that into Dubai Futures Accelerator.
Yeah.
And then they moved it one floor up, one floor down, then became 3 floors. Then it became a program where they did 7 pillars. And suddenly
It's a little bit like going to, sorry to interrupt,
No.
but it's a little bit like going to, when I visited it, what's that,
Silicon Valley?
no, Iron Man. Not Iron Man. Yes, Iron Man.
Okay.
Yeah, because...
The race, you mean?
No, not the race. The movie.
The movie, right?
The
Oh, you're
movie.
talking about from a futuristic technology
Yeah, because
perspective.
he's got his like whole area where
Yes,
he's
yes.
got all his suits
And all the
his
tech
toys.
and everything, right?
Am I thinking about the right person?
Maybe.
Yeah, and he's got that robot that walks around and
Yeah,
is
yeah.
always engaged.
It's very
Iron Man,
futuristic.
right?
Yeah, it's Iron Man. You got it. You got
so
it.
when
Robert
maybe,
Downey, yeah.
yeah, exactly. And so when the minister was showing us around, I can't remember his exact title now, but Minister of AI and Golden Visa or something.
Remote work, and it keeps getting out.
Yeah. But it felt like I actually told him. I said, "This feels like he doesn't look like Robert Downey, but it felt like it was like a
Right.
It was like an Iron Man
that's
thing.
the point.
And,
And that's the point, because what they did was they formalized the language
Yeah.
for people to recognize that there was
Yeah.
another category of something completely new.
Yeah.
Because up until then, everything that every family office was doing here
Yeah.
that wasn't seasoned, but it was doing businesses,
Yeah.
was buying real estate.
yeah, exactly.
They were just buying real estate, or
Dubai was just about tourism and real estate.
and very few families that were very
Yeah.
well seasoned
Yeah.
were investing in funds globally. But nothing was happening here.
Yeah.
So this was the first spark of this crescendo which we're experiencing now, where then
Yeah.
it wasn't even 4 or 5 years later that Saudi Arabia said we could do this. And it wasn't after
Yeah.
that Qatar said we could do this. And it's not after that
Yeah.
the DIFC coupled with this then said, Bahrain said we have to do this from a regulatory perspective.
Yeah.
You can actually plot this on a course that Dubai lit the fire on this
Yeah,
so strongly. But in parallel,
Go on.
what they did, which was super significant,
Yeah.
was the Golden Visa program.
Yeah.
And the Golden Visa program,
I
not
guess
many
that's why he
people
has
know
both
this.
job titles.
Yeah, well,
maybe.
They actually had this. What was it? It was actually started from a prime minister's project, PMO's office, prime minister's office,
Yeah.
in tandem with DFA, because they said if we want to retain talent, we want to grow
Yeah,
everything.
you need security of tenure.
Right, you need
can't
security
come
of
for 2
tenure.
years.
Right. And
Otherwise,
that's-
you're treated like
right.
maybe not a suitcase visit, but a short-term
And
visit.
who was
yeah.
part of the first accelerators of DFA? You had Uber, you had everyone else, you had some of the biggest names in the world, you had the guys from Waze.
Can we
Amazing.
double click on this transition from the Dubai you knew when you were a child
Oh my
growing up?
God.
Real estate.
We grew up. I mean,
a real estate play or a tourism play
my God.
too. 8 years ago or 10 years ago, if it said Dubai or Abu Dhabi or the UAE was going to become a technology play,
no chance.
they would have laughed.
Oh my God, no chance.
People would have said, this is just vaporware, it's just marketing,
this
right?
is just...
Talk about how this happened. How did this process happen?
If I can also
Yeah.
touch on this, because
Yeah.
you mentioned it, you use specific words. You use
Yeah.
build it and .com.
Yeah.
The definition of build it and .com has changed and evolved over
Okay.
time. In the past, it was bricks and mortar.
Yeah.
Right? Build the massive port.
Yeah.
And now you have one of the largest port operators in the world.
Yeah.
You build an airport.
Yeah.
an
Emirates.
airline,
Wow.
And it will enable.
Well, we've got another one coming
commerce,
soon.
trade finance,
Yeah.
a financial
Yeah.
hub.
Yeah. DFC,
Everything.
Javsa,
Yeah.
Javsa,
But
my
then
God.
what comes next, right?
Yeah.
And I think TCOM, Media City,
Yeah.
Internet City.
And
all
who
of
led
these
that?
things-
Gargawi.
Exactly.
His Excellency,
Yeah.
Mr.
All of these
Gargawi.
is to your
Yeah.
point, it's not just build it. That was enablement.
Yeah.
So I think of it more as enablement as
Yeah.
opposed to building.
Yeah.
Before we needed infrastructure.
Yeah.
Then we needed full business ownership. Then we needed tenure.
Regulation.
laws and-
Yes, regulation.
Awareness
Yeah.
building. So the
Yeah.
World Government Summit, Future Accelerators. These
Yeah.
are all examples of platforms of enablement, whether
Yeah.
it's awareness building, engagement, cross-pollination of people
Right.
Yeah.
and ideas. And all of this sort of builds to where we are today.
Yeah.
Because it's all of this. I mean, if you
Yeah.
look at a lot of the tourism numbers, a lot of it's business tourism.
Right.
It's a lot of it's
Yeah, yeah.
business. And what does that enable? Dubai enables commerce. It has the ports, it has the airports, it has
Yeah.
the connectivity, it has the events, the conferences,
Yeah.
and all of that coming together
Yeah.
into an amazing place. I mean, you don't even need
Yeah.
to leave.
Unbelievable.
But
But
talk
there-
about that transition. Sorry,
No,
talk
go,
about the
please.
transition from enabling, physical commerce to digital and technology, because it's the same spectrum, but it's a different type of thing, right? Because the entrepreneur who's building in software or in technology, or the talented entry-level engineer 10 years ago, this space was not on the map. Let's be, if you're in old economy, absolutely. If you're in banking, like I have been for most of my life, absolutely. But if you were in tech or in blockchain or AI,
You wouldn't set up
it
here.
wouldn't have been.
You'd be in India,
Or you'd be hoping to go from India to the Valley.
right? Yes.
So how did we get to the stage where now, whether it's Western media or observers are saying this place, and I mean the whole of the UAE is credible in AI and blockchain and tokenization. Just talk us through that with your sort of knowledge of what's happening behind the scenes. How did we get here?
I think a lot of it has to do with all these foundational elements. And
Yeah.
I think it's very hard to pinpoint
Sure.
one thing because it's not one thing. It's all of this
Yeah.
that's been curated and unveiled at the right times. It doesn't make sense to unveil a golden visa
Yeah.
when you have too much coming in and you're trying to control it.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense to unveil freehold ownership when you have inflationary pressures. But every single thing comes at the right time, and that's what's made it very beautiful over here. Is you go through these cycles of aggressive expansion, let it settle in. Aggressive expansion, let it settle in. And it's cyclical, and we've seen it for decades. We've seen it on a generational perspective. Maybe to address your point more specifically, around talent, because that's sort of an underlying thing that I was gathering from that is where we were in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s versus where we are in the 2010s, where we are in the 2020s. And a lot of it was, it had to be a little bit of a premium to attract someone to come here. I mean, you were literally coming to a tiny little town in the middle of nowhere, and you're relocating from somewhere in the world because we're growing at an exponential rate, but we didn't have all the resources we needed in the country, so we had to attract that. That came at the premium, but that started to shift. You saw that in the 2010s where people were willing to come. First, it started more regionally.
Yeah.
You saw it from South Asia, from the Middle East. People were willingly coming here and saying, I'd rather come here at par with what I could get elsewhere because A, proximity, safety, geopolitical stability, all of the things, macro stability, economic stability, safety.
You don't need that much of a vision or a hope or feel like it's a risk. It's all those are mitigated.
They're all coming here, but who's attracted first? You're bringing a lot of bankers, you're bringing people to establish industries that are saying, I want to call this home. And now once you've had people that have established that this place is home, their expertise that wants to stay here. They're the rounds that have been building the beautiful first layer of unicorns that we have coming into the region. And it's that expertise that then turns even more unicorn founders, more expertise. But then you get to layer two, and how do you attract engineering talent? How do you attract some of the other ones? And to your point, I think Gaurav, you mentioned it, is they want to look at the US. Why would they look here?
Well, they used to.
Well, they used to, and that's exactly
that's changing
the
now.
point. That's the 2020s, in my opinion. Is, some of the discussions we've been having is, I can't name the entities.
Sure.
One example of a type of entity, they're a massive gaming entity based out of the States. And said, look, I have to pay a massive premium to bring them to the States. They're far from home. And the pipeline of talent, a lot of it's coming from this wider region, right? And then, if I come here, they don't want that premium. They're closer to home, they're happier. But then more importantly, there's the golden visa, the regime that's coming to place. In the US, for example, they don't have a guaranteed person. They have to sponsor a visa. And that could be turned down.
Absolutely.
Or it could be turned down 2 years.
And it's getting harder and harder to get those.
Much
if you
harder.
come from countries that are in this region.
If you're building an organization, if you're trying to bring in that talent, at least over here, A, you're going to get that talent because you have a government that's willing to work with you to attract that talent, and B, to create that continuity. These programs are 10 years long, and who knows, they might even be more flexible in the future. But
Fingers crossed.
Hopefully.
Absolutely.
But that 10 years is already
No,
5x
it's a huge.
you know you're going to
No, the
get
10 years
the
was, I think, a major step.
Right. Major step. But like you said, it had to be unveiled at the right
time. If you're
time.
on a 2-year visa and the day you lose your job, you have 30 days to leave, you're never going to call this place.
Right.
Yeah.
And here,
you're like a short-term tourist, a long-term tourist.
But looking at all of this that we've been talking about, the historical aspect, the current trends, the current upward path, the focus, the spotlight.
Yeah.
And a lot of people who have self-awareness and interest in this region, and especially Dubai and what's happening here, I think we had a bit of a catalyst. We had two catalysts,
Okay.
which I think have really compounded people's personal safety, also assurances about the government and policy and infrastructure to come here much faster than they would. I think it's accelerated by 5 or 10 years, and I think those two things are COVID. I think the way
Yeah.
the UAE and Dubai reacted to COVID is the first time, right? As somebody who's been here all my life, you always have these radar points where I've been here for 42 years, my family's been here for 50 years, and then you see someone who's been here for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 2 years. You get a sense check of what people see as value
Yeah.
from here that brought them here to set up here. And so you're picking this radar from business perspective or job perspective, entrepreneur or employer or investor. And what you found was this universal piece of people that came here, whether it was for 1 year, 2 years, or they've been here for 20 years, went, I'm moving my families here because the security here is so fantastic. The services are so responsive. Everything is so good from a lifestyle perspective for me and my family. I want to move them here. And then the second thing which happened very closely afterwards is the sort of cementing of Web3 being a space where you could build from anywhere, create anywhere, and for the first time, the UAE, and I'm going to take a massive leap and say this, will be one of the primary exporters of Web3 technology companies in the next 10 years. So I think for the first time, when you look at the UAE or the region as importing, always importing services, we're importing talent, we're importing things. Now, with all of these building blocks in place, with this accelerated catalyst of COVID plus Web3 and everything else, I think the next crescendo for the next 10 years is the UAE can start exporting technology, which is limitless for resource, limitless for a number of things, good energy, nuclear, solar.
If I could just double down on what you were just saying there, just to take the point home as well as there's always this narrative of the UAE is pro-business, the UAE is pro-safety, the UAE is pro-health and consumer protection. But it was taught a lot of the times because you didn't see it. And COVID was the most visible time where you could see the government working extremely hard to make sure that all three of those things are in check. And this was a message to the world that it wasn't talk, it wasn't just a few people getting access to this. It is for everyone.
No, COVID was like
everyone's changed their narrative of the place.
I think COVID was like almost like an X-ray machine. So you could see inside, and it brought to the surface like ways some countries reacted with, for want of a better word, xenophobia and protectionism, and they closed themselves.
Yes.
And
unless you're Sweden, right? Where they just didn't.
Well, let's
they
leave
just
Sweden
said
out of this.
COVID doesn't even happen.
It's like it was like an X-ray machine.
That's a very good point as well. Back to what Laura was saying. Is, now, why would someone that could be anywhere in the world, sitting on an island, they could reduce anywhere, right? I mean, they're borderless in terms of what they're creating.
Right.
Why are they choosing to be here?
Exactly.
It's exactly that. Is they know their interests are going to be at least discussed. Well, obviously, there's the three hats that the government constantly has to maneuver, right? Building consumer trust is paramount. You can't do that.
Absolutely.
Just to be pro-business. So consumers are in check. Business in check, safety is in check. Right. All of this, because you want to keep the quality of life. You want to make sure that people want to continue to live and make sure that the government is acting in their best interest. Entities like Aura were created with this mindset, right? It's not come in and I'm going to put barriers to this. We want to talk and engage with everyone around. Which is why the Web3 ecosystem is just constantly pumped. And then all of a sudden you're seeing them starting to huddle and stay. Because they always had that sudden pressure of the government on such and such place decides to decide this is the only priority I have, overlooking the other two.
Consistency. We've talked a lot about the past.
We got to talk
the
about
present. We're going to talk about the future. Podcast of the future. So I guess Web3 is like a nice segue into the future. But as we wrap up this discussion, this podcast,
and the horizon seems to be just like the sun is out. The artificial sun has presented itself.
The sun is coming through the windows.
I think they took notice of it. Wow.
What is what does the next 5, 10, 15 years look like for the UAE, for Dubai? What industries the last 15 years, I first began to come to, first as a tourist from London, then I moved here probably about, no, more than 15 years ago, 2005, 2006, when they just after they built the Madinat. Because just,
This is Ronit's ability to do timelines. When they built the Madinah.
you know, like when the Mall of the Emirates, Mall of the Emirates was there, and
Yeah.
the Madinat. So
Early 2000s.
Early 2000s. I was maybe a couple of years after
Right.
they opened it, because it was still not too expensive. It was still new, not expensive. as it became.
Pre-2008, right?
Oh, definitely pre-2008.
There you go. So you're good.
So I've seen what last 15 years has been until maybe say COVID. COVID is like a serious break. And it used to be, we discussed real estate, ports, tourism, the airline, hospitality. And we talked about Web3. Obviously, there's huge efforts here and down the road in Abu Dhabi on AI.
Oh.
What are going to be the big 2, 3, 4 industries or sectors that, in your fund, top of mind, either for Dubai or just in general when you're thinking about investing? If you had to call out 2, 3, 4 sectors, what would they be?
So maybe I'll break it down into two things. Number one is where do I see the momentum,
Yeah.
and where do I see sort of this high-level movement, and
Yeah.
then where I personally am very bullish about.
Yeah.
That high-level momentum is one thing that I like to use, and I
Yeah.
describe Japan as being that, I describe Korea as being that,
Yeah.
and I describe us in the GCC and the UAE as being that.
Right.
We've modernized, but we haven't forgotten.
Okay.
So, I mean, as you can see,
Yeah.
we're embracing change, but we're also not forgetting who we are and the
Yeah.
grassroots.
Beautiful.
And that goes into the business world as well, and how we're sort of engaging with the next series of growth,
Yeah.
the next steps, and the what next. The
Yeah.
question marks around the what next is not forgetting the fundamentals of what makes us us.
Yes.
Safety, quality of
Yeah.
life, consumer confidence
Yeah.
is one layer.
Yeah.
The next layer is what are the core components of this?
Yeah.
What makes Dubai Dubai?
Yeah.
Is enablement of business and
Yeah.
business activities.
Yeah.
So continue to create those platforms for business and trade
Yeah.
to happen with the world. So neutrality,
Yeah.
confidence with the entire world, and making sure that that constantly is on our agenda, making sure that we're friends with as many people as possible, neutral with as many people as possible, because our fundamental language is enablement and making sure that people are given the choice to make the decisions, right? As a sort of an infrastructure layer. But what makes me super excited about the what next is what are we carving out in terms of opportunities. So there are blood bank moves that are happening in Saudi, in Qatar, in Abu Dhabi, in Dubai, and it's creating this opportunity around genomics, DNA testing, and creating a lot of life sciences opportunities, health tech opportunities that weren't present in the past.
Yeah.
Having this layer that the government's now willing to open up and allow for very curated, cautious research to take place. And
Oh, wow.
I call it cautious. That's what because at the end of the day, this is people's data, this is people's information that's there. So not at the cost of people's information, but creating opportunities where they didn't exist before. The other ones around IP, around construction and property, I think that's another exciting place for us because we're up for it. We've been growing, we've been creating, not just in this region, we've been building all over the world.
Yeah.
Why aren't we exporting that IP? And I feel that that's another movement, I think, in terms of where we're headed. The other two, I mean, you've seen the news. You touched on Web3, and we're very excited that this is becoming a global hub. If it's not already a global
And it's
hub.
definitely one of the, and because Web3 will be decentralized, but it'll be one of the
Right.
half a dozen hubs.
I mean, you've seen the massive investments that are taking place over here. Where
Huge.
the minister
Huge.
was fully focused on that.
Yeah. How many countries have a minister for AI? I don't know.
No,
I don't
none.
have the number, but we were definitely the
You were the first.
Yeah, I mean, World Government Summit is
Yeah.
really a UAE thing. I mean, pretty much. I mean,
Engagement and enablement
Right.
and
Yeah.
showcasing what's
Yeah,
happening
yeah,
on the
a
ground.
minister of happiness, a minister. They really want to try and touch
If I
on
can
things
also
which
add
people
one
do.
layer on
Yeah.
top of that is how those bridges aren't just physical bridges; they're negotiating bridges. Our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, for example, has a tech
Vertical?
tech vertical
Right.
for diplomacy. So
Okay.
tech diplomacy, for the first time, is happening out of this part of the world. So imagine you're building tech and you know that the government's there to make sure that your tech is protected wherever you're looking to export it as well.
Something that I was talking to quite a few diplomatic officers about 5 years ago. And they implemented it as an idea, because the concept of soft power didn't actually come up till, again, 10 years ago. No one really discussed it or labeled it or categorized it or looked to carry it through. So it's...
And it goes back to what you were saying, Ronit, is sectors is one thing, but how do you make sure that it's viable and why out of here? And all of these rails are getting created, and that's really the role of the government and the ecosystem, is to provide those rails for this innovation.
Getting to the why.
You know, it's amazing when COVID happened, one of the top economies in the world, I won't say who, but again, close to that diplomatic office because of UAE technology and all this stuff I do in investing, the official guidelines from that economy and their diplomatic office there to all their officers here was stay in Dubai, you're better off.
Okay.
Don't come back home.
Right.
It's not good for you here. And they actually left all of them back here, and they were actually happier for it. And some people tried to leave from that diplomatic office in that part of the world.
It's another. If people listening to this podcast want to learn more about your organization, the work Dubai and the UAE are doing about the future, what are the best sources they should consult? What are the things they should look at? Is it your website? Are there other documents you should refer them to for, if I don't know, some particularly earnest listeners want to do some extra reading?
Well, the first thing I will say is definitely reach out to either myself or the team. We're all accessible. Our website has a constant blog that showcases some of the thought leadership pieces that we're putting together about the ecosystem and obviously with people that we're engaging with to constantly raise awareness about what's going on in the ecosystem. So either meet us at events, we try to be at as many as possible, but we're also very reachable. I mean, we try to speak to as many people as possible because our role here is not just to deploy capital, it's also to listen, hear, take that feedback and serve it to the right decision makers in the public sector.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's a wonderful building. Thank you.
All the best.